At what point in your path did you decide to go back to school and get your doctorate?
Well, after St. John's, I went to Spain to study for my master's.
Mm.
And that came about because I had a real good buddy named Ed Peduzzi, who was in the Spanish club with me, and we used to hang out a lot. And he was a Spanish major. I was a minor. I was an education major. And he said to me one day, he told me that he was going to Spain to study for his master's through a program at NYU. And he said, "Come on, Sonia, let's do it." Or Sonny. They used to call me Sonny. "Come on, Sonny, let's do it. Why don't you come?" And, well, I was so excited by that idea because, of course, I didn't have the going away to college experience. So I decided to apply to go to Spain. And that's what, I got in. I was just so happy about that. But I told my mother, I still remember I had come back from NYU where I was told that I was in the program. And I was, just walking on cloud nine. And I walked into our house and I told my mother, "Mami, voy a España. I'm going to Spain." And she sat down and cried, because it was hard for her to see her girls go, But I went to Spain. This was way before internet, of course, and phone calls were very expensive, so mostly we wrote a lot. And so I lived in Spain for a year. I went for my master's, and I always say, and I came back with my mister, because that's where I met Anjan. And we were married just a few months after we met.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. We met in March. We were married the following January, but we were separated by an ocean for 5 of those months. So we really only were going out for about 4 months before I went back to visit him at Christmas time, and I got off the plane and he said, "This is ridiculous, let's get married." And so we eloped.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so that was my first year of teaching. And so I was teaching at that school. That was a very hard experience for me, and I actually decided that I was really suffering from anxiety. It was just so much going on, so I left that for the second year. I left early. I left like in March, and I thought I'd never go back to teaching because it was so difficult. Teaching itself had been difficult, but I was doing quite well by then. And my assistant principal called me in my first year of teaching, a master teacher, which I wasn't, but it made me feel really great. But all of the turmoil around was just really hard. And so I thought I wouldn't be teaching again. And this had been my lifelong dream, so this was really traumatic for me. In the meantime, I was teaching at a place called the Spanish American Institute, and I was teaching ESL to adults. And then I got this call that they were recruiting teachers for the first bilingual school in the Northeast. And would I be interested in going in for an interview? So I thought, well, Jeff, that sounds interesting. And I went for the interview and I got the job. And, it was one of those jobs that really changed how I thought about education, because I saw, as I said before, the benefit of a bilingual education. This was a school where everybody in school, from the principal to the custodian, spoke English and Spanish. And all the kids were on some level of bilingualism. The school was like 85% Latino, mostly Puerto Rican. And the rest were mostly African American. I think we had one Chinese American kid. And so it was, an incredibly empowering experience for me. So I was there for teaching for 2 years, and then I was a curriculum specialist at that school for 2 years. And my buddy Edminio, we had both been 4th grade teachers. He was across the hall from me. So we were 4th grade teachers for 2 years. And then, I was for a year. And then I subbed because I had my first daughter. And then the principal asked both of us to be curriculum specialists because he had a grant. It was one of the very first Title VII grants in the country. And so we became curriculum specialists. And so we did that for 2 years. And then one day, Minio came and he said, Missy, that's what he used to call me, Missy, I just got a job at Brooklyn College and in the Puerto Rican Studies Department because they're starting a teacher education program with the School of Education. And they're looking for more people. Missy, you should apply. And, you know, the thought was so riveting for me. But, you know, I didn't know, and I said, you know, why not? Let me apply. So I went and I applied for it. I had like a 3-hour interview, mostly with students. Students were very active then. This was, you know, the height of the student movement, really. It was the early 1970s. And so, so I got the job, and I still remember walking out of the interview, and they had already told me that they were hiring me. Mm-hmm. And Angel and Alicia, who was 3, were waiting in the car for me, and we went out to dinner, and I was just so ecstatic. I couldn't believe it, and I kept thinking, oh my goodness, you know, wait till I tell Mommy, my mother, and wait till I tell Papi. So my parents both got to see me become a professor. Mm. My father died a year later, but they were really happy and
proud,
very proud. So it was then that I decided that I really wanted to get a doctorate because I loved that job. I loved doing what I was doing. I loved the teacher education part of it. It was also in the midst of all this turmoil and chaos. There were takeovers all the time. There were demonstrations. This is where I learned how to do public speaking because I had to go to demonstrations and, you know, and speak. And I used to joke that we should start a company called Rent a Demo and just take all the equipment to whatever demonstration we were going. But, you know, it was a very heady time, and it was difficult, and it was draining, but very, very exciting. And so I decided, I really love doing this, and I know I can't do it without a doctorate. Mm-hmm. So I stayed there for 3 years, and then I decided that I should be applying for a doctorate. But meanwhile, they had told me about these, one of my colleagues had told me about these fellowships, the Ford Foundation fellowships that they had for Puerto Ricans, Mexican Americans, African Americans, and Native people. And she said, you should apply. She was on the committee. She was a renowned historian. Now, we were 8 in the department, and 5 of us didn't have doctorates. That just shows, you know, this was such an incipient, and nobody had ever heard of Puerto Rican studies before, right? Mm-hmm. And so very few of us had doctorates. The people who had doctorates were mostly coming from Puerto Rico, from the academy there, and from one of the many colleges that they had there. And so I said, I better get a doctorate. And so I started asking around because I didn't know, you know, how do you go about picking a college for a doctorate? And so I started hearing good things about UMass, which was a very exciting place to be in the late 60s and early 70s. So in the meantime, I had applied for this Ford Foundation Fellowship, and I received it, but I hadn't yet applied for a doctoral program. So I said, I better apply. And that's when I applied to UMass and met. I had the name of somebody who was in curriculum, which is what I had decided to study. His name was Bob Sinclair. And I came, and I drove up with Alicia, who was, you know, about 5 at the time, to meet him and his family. And we just fell in love with the area and, you know, decided that this is it. And he sent me to meet Silvia Viera, who was the professor, one of the professors in the bilingual program. He said, you should really meet her, you know, it would be good for you to, because you have all this experience in bilingual. Those were the courses that I was teaching. Mm-hmm. And so, So I did go meet her, and a week or two later, she called and said that she was nominating me for a Title VII fellowship. So that's why we ended up with 2 fellowships, for 3 years for one and 4 years for the other, that paid my way through, through the whole doctoral program. So we were very, very lucky. And we adopted our daughter Marisa the second year that we were here, and Angel my husband, stayed home with her. So we were able to live on the fellowships, which was really fabulous.
Wonderful.
And I was a full-time doctoral student. When you're a full-time doctoral student, you're doing a lot of other things. So I was teaching courses in bilingual education. I was teaching other courses. But it just seemed like the right fit. It was a wonderful place for me to be. And the first class that I walked into was Bob Suzuki's class called Foundations of Multicultural Education. That was 1975. And it was another one of those transformative experiences that changed forever how I thought about education, because it gave me the language that I had been looking for, that I had been trying these things out when I was a curriculum specialist, when I was teaching. I was trying to do multicultural education without having the words for it.
Sure.
And so this just opened my eyes to a whole new experience. And it was really wonderful. I mean, I know that doctoral work it's a lot of work. Some of it is tedious, some of it can be scary, some of it you feel that, do you really belong here, and so on. And yes, I had some of those feelings, but I have to say that it was such an incredibly, wonderful experience for me, my doctoral work, the 4 years that I was a doctoral student. And then part of that was that I met Paulo Freire, because he was invited to UMass for several years, usually to spend a month, usually the month of January. And I made sure to always be on the committee that organized his visit, because I had read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and that was another one of those experiences that was just incredible. And so, that was that made a real impact on my life. And the courses that I took were also, just really wonderful. I had great professors. Luis Fuentes was one of my professors. He was in bilingual education. He was one of my mentors, as was Bob Suzuki, and I felt badly that I didn't have any women on my committee. So I asked if I could bring Maria Sanchez, who was the chair of Puerto Rican Studies at Brooklyn College, and a wonderful colleague who I loved a lot, if she could be a 4th person as an external member of my committee, and she was.
Oh, great.
And so that was really great. So I had a Puerto Rican there also, Luis was also Puerto Rican, and a woman. And she had been so involved in the struggle at Brooklyn College and before. So it was a great committee, and I was really fortunate that I was able to have that experience. It was, I always say I landed in the right place.